Today, we're going to talk about something that goes against pretty much everything you've ever learned about business. We're going to talk about why competition is for losers. Yeah, you heard that right. The idea that competition is good for business is just flat out wrong. And if you want to build something truly lasting and valuable, you need to escape it. To really get what I mean, let's just start with a quick question.
Okay, so let's do a little thought experiment. It's 2012. You've got some money to invest. You have two choices. Option A, you can buy every single US airline, the whole industry, a massive, critical piece of the economy. Or option B, you can just buy one company, Google. So which one do you think is actually worth more?
The answer is pretty shocking when you see the numbers. Back in 2012, all the US airlines combined brought in almost $200 billion in revenue. Google, only about $50 billion. So the airlines made 4 times more money, right? But get this, over their entire history, the total combined profit of all those airlines was basically zero. It's this endless cycle of making a little money, going bankrupt, getting restructured, just a brutal business. Meanwhile, Google, with just a fraction of the revenue, was valued at over $400 billion. I mean, how is that even possible?
Well, the answer gets at what we could call the big lie of business. We're all taught this story that capitalism and competition are like two sides of the same coin. But the truth, the actual truth, is that they're total opposites. Think about it. In a world of perfect competition, nobody makes any real profit. Any advantage you have just gets competed away until profits are driven down to zero. Capitalism, on the other hand, is about accumulating capital, and that only happens when you escape competition. It happens when you have a monopoly.
So, you might be wondering, if this is true, why don't more people talk about it? Well, it's because businesses have a huge incentive to lie about competition, and there are 2 big ways they do it, depending on whether they're a loser or a winner. So let's start with the loser's lie. This is the lie you tell yourself. Imagine you're opening a restaurant. You know it's a super competitive, tough business. So you tell yourself a little story to feel special. You say, oh, we're not just a restaurant, we're the only British food restaurant in all of Palo Alto. See? You've convinced yourself you've carved out this tiny little monopoly. This is what's called the intersection trap. You take a bunch of small categories, like British food and Palo Alto, and you define your market as the tiny sliver where they overlap. It's kind of like a bad movie pitch, It's a sci-fi Western horror movie. Sure, maybe no one's ever made that before, but that doesn't mean anyone wants to see it. The hard reality is, your British restaurant is still competing with every single other restaurant in town.
Okay, so while the losers are lying to themselves, the winners are lying to everybody else. This is the winner's lie. A true monopoly does the exact opposite. Instead of pretending they're huge in a tiny market, they pretend they're just a tiny player in a massive market. And why would they do that? Simple. To avoid the one thing they're terrified of, government regulators showing up. Google is the master of this. They will do anything to avoid saying they have a monopoly in search. So what's their story? They say, oh, we're not a search company, we're a technology company. And then they'll point to all these other things. Look, we're competing with Apple and mobile phones, and with Amazon and cloud computing, and with Detroit and self-driving cars. They make it sound like they're just this little guy fighting for scraps in this giant trillion-dollar tech industry. But that's just framing. The second you define their market correctly, as the search market, the whole picture flips. I mean, look at this. It's not a competition, it's a domination. Google is the market. Bing and everyone else, they're barely even a rounding error. By telling that we're a tech company story, they get all the benefits of a monopoly without any of the unwanted attention. It's brilliant, really. Okay, so we've established the goal is to build a monopoly. How in the world do you actually do it? Well, the secret, and this is the really counterintuitive part, is to start by thinking incredibly small. The playbook is actually pretty straightforward. There are 3 steps. First, you pick a market that is so tiny, so specific that nobody else even thinks it's a real market. They just laugh at you. Second, you go in and you completely, utterly dominate that tiny little market. You become the only game in town. And then only after you own that niche, you start to expand outward, one adjacent market at a time, like ripples spreading out in a pond. And hey, this isn't some abstract theory. This is exactly what the most successful companies in the world did. Amazon didn't start as the everything store. Jeff Bezos started by selling one thing: books online. That was it. Facebook didn't launch to connect the entire planet. It started to connect just one campus, Harvard University. And PayPal, They didn't go after all of e-commerce. They focused on this tiny hyper-specific group of 20,000 power sellers on eBay. Each one of them became a monopoly in a tiny pond before they ever tried to become the ocean. Now, there is a really important warning that comes with all of this. Because even if you go out and create something totally world-changing, it doesn't automatically mean you'll build a valuable business. And this is the crucial difference between creating value and actually capturing it. So let's be super clear about this. The amount of value you create for society, let's call that variable X, has absolutely zero, and I mean zero, relationship to the amount of that value you get to keep as a business, which we'll call variable Y. These two things are not connected. And this right here is probably the most tragic example of that principle you'll ever see. On one side, you have Albert Einstein. He fundamentally changed our understanding of reality itself. The value he created for humanity is almost infinite, but did he capture any of it? No. He died with very little money because the business model of science is to give your ideas away for free. His Y variable was zero. Now, compare that to the founders of Twitter. They created a simple, 140-character messaging service. Pretty cool, but in the grand scheme of things, it's modest value created. But they built a business model that allowed them to capture billions from it. The lesson here is brutal. Don't be the brilliant, broke genius. So this brings us to the final point. And honestly, it's bigger than just business strategy. It's really about the nature of competition itself and the way it can trap us. There's this great story from Peter Thiel about when he worked at a fancy New York law firm. From the outside, it looked like the absolute peak of success. But on the inside, everybody was completely miserable. They all talked about how much they wanted to leave. And when he finally did quit, one of his colleagues looked at him in total shock and said, "Wow, I had no idea it was possible to escape from Alcatraz." But of course, all Thiel had to do was just walk out the front door. And that story just perfectly captures the ultimate danger of competition. When you're in it, it's all-consuming. Your entire focus is on beating the person right next to you, on being just a little bit better at the game that everybody else is playing. And it completely stops you from stepping back and asking the much, much more important question. Is this game even worth winning? So I'll leave you with that thought. Take a look at your own life, your career, your business, whatever it is. Are you just caught up in the race, trying to be a tiny bit better than the person next to you? Are you fighting tooth and nail to get through the same crowded door as everyone else? Or is there maybe another way? A wide open door, just around the corner, that nobody else has even bothered to look for? Is the game you're competing in actually worth winning?